The underground chamber beneath the Alexandrov Kremlin smells of iron and incense, and something else, something organic and wrong, that catches in the back of the throat and refuses to leave. The year is 1571, and the woman chained to the stone wall is named Marfa Vasilyevna Sobakina. She is 19 years old. She has been the Tsarina of all Russia for exactly 12 days. She can feel the cold of the chains cutting into her wrists where they have rubbed the skin raw over 3 days of hanging. She can hear the chanting of the black-robed monks who stand in the corners of the chamber, their faces hidden in shadow, reciting prayers that sound less like worship and more like incantation. She can see the instruments arranged on the wooden table before her iron pincers still warm from the brazier, copper implements whose purposes she cannot identify, but whose implications make her bowels loosen with terror, glass vials containing liquids that catch the torchlight with oily gleams. She was, until 15 days ago, the winner of the greatest bride show in Russian history, chosen from over 2,000 young women brought to Moscow from every corner of the Tsardom, selected by Ivan Vasilievich himself as the most beautiful, the most suitable, the most worthy to become his third wife and give him the heirs his dynasty required. Her father had wept with joy when the Tsar's messengers arrived. Her mother had sewn her wedding garments with trembling hands. The entire Sobakina family had risen from minor nobility to the inner circle of power in a single afternoon. Now she hangs in a chamber that officially does not exist, watched by men in black robes who are not quite monks and not quite soldiers, the Oprichniki, Ivan's personal enforcers, who have sworn oaths to the Tsar that supersede all obligations to God, family, or humanity. The broom and dog's head that hang from their saddles symbolize their mission, to sweep away treason and bite the Tsar's enemies. But the enemies they bite most often are women. She does not know yet that she will be dead within 3 days. She does not know that the poison already coursing through her veins, administered in tiny doses over the past 2 weeks, will finish its work before the week ends. She does not know that Ivan will declare her death the result of witchcraft, will execute dozens of people he claims conspired to murder his bride, will use her death as justification for a new wave of terror that will kill tens of thousands. What she knows is that her husband, the man she married 12 days ago, the man who is supposed to protect her, the man who holds absolute power over every person in Russia, is standing in the shadows of this chamber, watching what his men are doing to her, and that the expression on his face is not horror or concern or even indifference. It is fascination. "Tell me again," Ivan says, his voice soft and almost gentle, "about the conspiracy against me." "There is no conspiracy, my lord." Her voice is barely a whisper. She has said these words 100 times over the past 3 days. "I swear before God and all his saints, there is no conspiracy." "Then why are you sick, my little bird? Why do you grow weaker each day while my physicians can find no cause? Someone is killing you. Someone in my own court, in my own household, is murdering my bride. And you will tell me who." She cannot tell him because she does not know. She does not know that the poison comes from Ivan himself, administered by his own servants on his own orders, testing whether she might be an assassin sent by his enemies, testing whether the Sobakina family might be plotting against him, testing simply because Ivan tests everyone and trusts no one and finds something satisfying in watching beautiful things break. The Oprichniki with the heated pincers steps forward. Ivan nods, almost imperceptibly. And what happens next in that chamber beneath the Alexandrov Kremlin is why Hollywood will never, can never, tell the true story of what Ivan the Terrible did to the women in his life. What you are about to learn has been systematically suppressed for 450 years by historians who found the truth too disturbing to include in respectable accounts. You know about Ivan the Terrible. You have heard about his conquest of Kazan. his expansion of Russian territory, his creation of the first centralized Russian state. You may know that he killed his own son in a fit of rage. The famous painting by Repin shows Ivan cradling his dying heir, eyes wild with horror at what he has done. But you do not know about the women. You do not know that Ivan married at least 7 times, possibly 8, and that every single one of these marriages ended in the woman's death, disappearance, or forced exile to a convent where she would spend the rest of her life in isolated captivity. You do not know that the pattern of these endings was so consistent that modern forensic historians have concluded Ivan was systematically destroying the women he married using methods that ranged from slow poisoning to sudden violence to psychological torture so severe that the victims simply stopped functioning as human beings. You do not know about the Oprichnina, the state within a state that Ivan created in 1565, staffed by men who wore black robes and rode black horses, and swore oaths of absolute obedience that made them into something between secret police and religious cult. You do not know what these men did to the wives and daughters of nobles, suspected of disloyalty, or simply nobles whose property Ivan wanted to seize, whose bloodlines he wanted to end, whose existence he found inconvenient. Tonight you will learn what Ivan's system did to women. You will learn about the bride shows that gathered thousands of young women for inspection, like livestock at a market. You will learn about the preparation that selected brides underwent before their wedding nights, procedures documented in court records that have never been translated into English. You will learn about the fates of 7 Tsarinas and countless noblewomen who entered Ivan's orbit and emerged, if they emerged at all, as shadows of the people they had been. You will learn about Marfa Sobakina, who was 19 years old and Tsarina for 15 days before dying of a poison that modern toxicologists have identified from the analysis of her remains. You will learn about Maria Dolgorukaya, who was drowned the morning after her wedding night because Ivan discovered she was not a virgin. You will learn about Anna Vasilchikova, who was forced into a convent at age 23 and spent the next 40 years in a cell so small she could not fully extend her arms. Subscribe if you want to understand the hidden history of one of the most brutal regimes in human memory. Comment below telling me where in the world you are watching from. Because Marfa is still hanging in that chamber beneath the Alexandrov Kremlin, and the Oprichnik with the heated pincers is approaching her, and I am going to tell you exactly what happened in that room, and in dozens of other rooms, to dozens of other women, across the 24 years of Ivan's reign of terror. But first, I need to warn you, this is not the romantic tragedy of a tormented ruler. This is not the psychological drama of a brilliant but unstable mind. This is what actually happened to real women. Women with names and families and lives that were systematically destroyed by a man who held absolute power and used it to break every woman who came within his reach. I am going to be specific, because these women deserve to have their experiences acknowledged accurately. And I am going to make you understand that the monster in this story is not mental illness or historical circumstance. The monster is a system designed to identify women, isolate them, break them, and dispose of them with the same methodical efficiency that characterized everything Ivan did. Let us begin with the bride shows. The Russian bride show was an institution that combined beauty pageant, livestock auction, and political calculation into a process that determined which women would be destroyed by proximity to power. When a czar required a wife, messengers were sent to every province of the realm, commanding noble families to present their eligible daughters for inspection. The process was theoretically voluntary. No family was legally required to participate. In practice, refusal was impossible. A family that refused to present their daughters was declaring either that they had something to hide or that they considered themselves above the czar's requirements. Either interpretation could be fatal. The numbers were staggering. For Ivan's second bride show in 1561, approximately 1,500 young women were gathered in Moscow for the initial inspection. For his third show in 1571, the number exceeded 2,000. These women came from every corner of Russia, from wealthy boyar families in Moscow to minor nobles in distant provinces, from established dynasties to families barely above the level of prosperous merchants. They were gathered first in regional centers, where local officials conducted preliminary inspections. The criteria were specific and documented in administrative records that survive in Russian archives. Age between 15 and 23. Height within specified ranges. Weight proportionate to height. Skin clear of blemishes, scars, or birthmarks in visible locations. Hair thick and lustrous. Teeth present and uncorrupted. Bearing dignified but not proud. Voice pleasing but not shrill. Movements graceful but not theatrical. Beyond these physical requirements, investigators examined family histories for any hint of scandal, disloyalty, or connection to the Tsar's enemies. They interrogated servants about the young women's temperaments, their habits, their private behaviors. They questioned priests about confession patterns, looking for evidence of sins that might indicate problematic character. Approximately 70% of candidates were eliminated at the regional level. The remaining 30%, perhaps 500 to 600 women, were transported to Moscow for the next stage of evaluation. Modern historians who have analyzed these records recognize the process as deliberately dehumanizing. By reducing women to lists of physical measurements and behavioral assessments, the system trained everyone involved: candidates, families,